Hey church, welcome and thank you for worshiping with us. Wherever you're worshiping, in your home or on your TV, laptop or phone, you are a part of this family. And you could watch or listen to past messages by heading to mycornerstone.family. On our sermons page, you can view playlists, search for past messages, and more. You can even listen to our content by subscribing to the Cornerstone America's podcast, which can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. I hope you enjoy the message and thank you for being a part of the Cornerstone family. Let's jump into this though. Just picture this. Let's get the setting down. Let's get the context. Picture Babylon in 539 BC, just a few years ago. The greatest city on the face of the earth. The walls are so thick you can race chariots around on top. Seems impenetrable. Hanging gardens were one of the ancient wonders of the world. So you have that there. The people would come just to see it, just to visit, just want to get their eyes on it. And inside the palace, you have King Belshazzar throwing the party of the century with 1,000 nobles, wives, concubines, and the wine is flowing like a river. Look what's going on in verse 1. King Belshazzar had a great, not just a banquet, but a great banquet for 1,000 of his nobles. They drank wine with them. So he's thrown this great party. And what we know from history is that while this party is going on, that the Medo-Persian Empire is rerouting a river. There was the Euphrates River that ran right through the middle of the city, and the walls were built around it. They had a bridge that crossed over from the east and the west because the river ran north to south. And so nobody could get in there, but what they were doing was rerouting the Euphrates River to a nearby lake so that the river waters would go down, and then they would walk right into the city on the north end, right into the city on the south end where the river came into the city, where the river came out of the city. And as this party is going on, the Medo-Persian Empire or army is actually coming into the city and getting ready to take it over. A crazy what is happening. And King Belshazzar is having a party and throwing this big party. So very, very interesting that this huge city, and they could have gone for years. They probably felt like they were protected. They had like 20 years worth of supplies they could have continued to eat. They had the river running through the city. They had fresh water coming through. So they probably thought they were okay, but the opposing army was going to get in and just change life for them. So this is what is about to happen. Look at verse 2. While Belshazzar was drinking his wine, he gave orders to bring gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem. Now, if you remember the first message that I did, we talked about how they had taken some of the things from the temple in Jerusalem. And here they are, the gold and silver goblets that Nebuchadnezzar, his father, his grandfather, had taken from the temple in Jerusalem. So the king and his nobles, his wives and concubines might drink from them. So they got these goblets that they'd taken out of the temple in Jerusalem, and these are holy, utensils and stuff that from the temple, and they're going to use them like party glasses, like party cups for their party that's going on. Now, King Nebuchadnezzar had stolen them out of the temple when he ransacked Jerusalem, had them in storage someplace, and his son decides, let's pull those out and let's start using those. And we're going to find out more about why he did that. Verse 3, so they brought in the gold goblets and had taken them from the temple of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his nobles, his wives and concubines drank from them. And notice what they did in verse 4. As they drank the wine, they praised the gods of gold and silver, of bronze and iron, wood and stone. So they take these cups that had been in the temple of God, and now they're using them at a party, and they are praising these fake gods and using them. Really, this is kind of just a pushback or slapback on God. Verse 5, this is when it gets really interesting. Suddenly, the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall near the lampstand in the royal palace. The king watched the hand as it wrote. Could you imagine this? This hand shows up, and maybe we can imagine this a little bit. Anybody remember the Addams family? Just saying, that's where they got this from, right? And they had the hand, it was called Thing, right? Its name was Thing, and so it had a hand. It was kept in a box. They let it out sometimes. And this is where the saying is, the handwriting's on the wall. Sometimes we use that expression. It comes from here. It's a warning that something bad's going to happen. Like somebody got fired and you're like, yeah, the handwriting was on the wall. We knew that was coming, right? That's how it's used. It comes from this story. So you can imagine as they're in this party, everybody's having a good time, they're drinking, they've got these goblets that were in the temple, and then all of a sudden as they're drinking from them, this hand shows up and starts writing on the wall. In verse 6, you see the king here, his face turned pale, and he was so frightened, his legs became weak, and his knees were knocking. No doubt. I mean, if you saw a hand writing on the wall out of nowhere, you'd freak out too. His face turned pale, his legs became weak. Now let me just focus on the his legs became weak part for a second, because different translations translate it a little bit differently, and there are a couple options for you to choose from here. Of course, I'm using the NIV, his legs became weak, makes sense. Or the NLT says his legs gave way beneath him, like they buckled, like he was gonna faint or fall down, which was very possible, he was pale. The ESV says his limbs gave way. New King James says the joints of his hips were loosened. Interesting. The Old King James, sometimes you just gotta throw back. Today we're going back. Old King James, the joints of his loins were loosed. Now, here's the idea behind this. There's two ways to understand this, and the debate is going on. You wrestle through it yourself. Number one, the polite reading of it, that this is an idiom for just physical collapse, like he fainted, he needed a chair. I need to sit down. What is going on? That's a possibility, and that's the polite reading of that. There's a more blunt reading of this, that his hip joints, the Hebrew and Aramaic scholars, some argue that the phrase is a euphemism for losing control of the bowels or the bladder. He was so terrified that he lost control of his bodily functions and soiled himself right there in front of 1,000 nobles. That's possible. Even conservative interpreters land on one, but they say number two is possible. Which gives us a powerful image of either way, a powerful image of what is happening. And this may be where we get the other expression, it scared the you-know-what out of him. May have come from this text right here. I can't verify that, I'm just saying, possible. Anyways, okay, you still with me? Stacy's not in the room, right? I'm okay. All right, I'm good. We're gonna keep going. This is Happy Mother's Day, everybody. Okay, all right, verse 7. What does the king do? The king does what every good pagan king does. He looks to the enchanters, the astrologers, and diviners, trying to figure out what this means. And he said to these wise men of Babylon, whoever reads this writing and tells me what it means will be clothed with purple and have a gold chain placed around his neck, and he'll be made third highest ruler in the kingdom. This is what I'll give to anybody who can come and tell me what this means, because this guy is scared. I won't talk anymore about how scared he was. Daniel chapter 5, verse 8, then all the king's wise men came in, and they could not read the handwriting. They couldn't figure out what this meant. What does this mean? And so if you go to the next verse, I don't have it on here, but the king gets even more terrified. The nobles are baffled. The party is over. The room is silent. And they're thinking, what do we do now? Verse 10, look what happens. The queen, this is the king's mom, comes walking in. For all you mothers out there, this is for you. The queen, hearing the voices of the king and his nobles, came into the banquet hall. May the king live forever. She said, don't be alarmed. Don't look so pale. Because she was somewhere across the palace, heard her son's voice. This doesn't sound good. And she comes over. She wasn't invited. She wasn't at the party. She wasn't drinking. She wasn't holding these goblets and worshiping these false idols. She hears the voices. There's concern. And she comes over, just like a mom to be able to hear that in the voice of her son. Isn't it? I mean, you moms have ears. I mean, you can be in the grocery store and hear a crowded room and hear your child's voice over top of the roar of the crowd and know, that's my baby. That's my child. What do they need? And you know it. You can be deep in sleep and the baby can cough or cry and you will wake up like, what do they need? What do they need? Moms have ears that hear that the rest of us, we miss. His mother heard this, and she comes in. And notice what she says, may the king live forever, doing the politeness thing. He is the king. She said, don't be alarmed. Don't look so pale. How many times have you gone to your mom when you didn't know what to do? Maybe you're in crisis. Maybe you're between two choices. Maybe you made a decision. Maybe I had the wrong decision. I can think of many times I went to my mom, a little concerned. My knees were shaking. I didn't soil myself, but I was scared. What do I do? And found comfort in my mom. This is what she did for him. Mothers hear things that we don't hear. It says, don't be alarmed. Don't look so pale. Verse 11, listen, and then she points him. She points him to the man of God. There's a man in your kingdom who has a spirit of the holy gods in him. It's talking about Daniel. In the time of your father, he was found to have insight and intelligence and wisdom like that of the gods. Your father, King Nebuchadnezzar, appointed him to chief of the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners. He did this because Daniel, whom the king called Belshazzar, was found to have a keen mind in knowledge and understanding, and also the ability to interpret dreams, explain riddles, and solve difficult problems. Call for Daniel, and he will tell you what the writing means. Now, here's what I submit to you, is that he knew Daniel. I don't think he liked Daniel. I think he wanted to get, I think he put Daniel off somewhere. Daniel, during Nebuchadnezzar's reign, had a very high ranking among the wise men. And then I think at some point, Belshazzar just kind of moves him to the side, puts him way back off somewhere because he doesn't want anything to do with him. Maybe he thought his advice was out of date. We've got a new way of doing things. Didn't like what he was saying. Didn't like what his dad had done. Pushed him off somewhere. Didn't want to hear God's perspective on the situations. Verse 13. So Daniel was brought before the king, and the king said to him, "Are you Daniel?" It sounds like he doesn't know him, but I think he knows him. "Are you Daniel, one of the exiles, my father?" I think he's being condescending to him. I think he's trying to be dismissive to them. I think he doesn't like him. "Are you one of the exiles my father, the king, brought from Judah?" And then Daniel goes in to respond to him. Look what Daniel says. "Your Majesty, the Most High God, gave your father Nebuchadnezzar sovereignty and greatness and glory and splendor. Because of the high position he gave him, all the nations and peoples of every language dreaded and feared him." Verse 20. "But when his heart became arrogant," remember the story from last week, "when his heart became arrogant and hardened with pride, he was deposed from his royal throne and stripped of his glory." That's what we talked about last week. He was driven away from people and given the mind of an animal, and he lived with wild donkeys and ate grass like the ox, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven until he acknowledged that the Most High God is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and sets over them anyone he wishes. This is the warning that Belshazzar had ignored. Because look at verse 22. "But you, Belshazzar, his son, have not humbled yourself, though you knew all of this." He knew, but he didn't want to hear it. He knew, he didn't want to follow it. So let's get Daniel as far away from me as possible, because I didn't want to hear that man, because I have my own plan. And he was lifted up in pride, was not following in the footsteps of his father, and he knew. He said, "You've not humbled yourself, and you knew all this." Here's the thing, Belshazzar wasn't ignorant. He had been hardened to the revelation of what his dad had learned. Most of us are not strangers to the truth, but many times we negotiate with it, don't we? We know the right thing to do. We know the truth, but we're going to negotiate with it and see if we can just work it down to a level that's more manageable for us, because I want to do what I want to do. That's where most of us are. He crossed a line. Look at verse 23. "Instead, you have set yourself up against the Lord of heaven." And he set himself up against the Lord of heaven. "You had the goblets from his temple brought to you, and you and your nobles, your wives and your concubines, drank from them. You praised the gods of silver and gold and bronze and iron and wood and stone." And notice, "which cannot see or hear or understand." But contrast this, "but you did not honor the God who holds in his hand your life and all your ways." And you've been worshiping gods that can't see, can't hear, can't understand, when you could have been worshiping the God who holds your life in his hands in all of your ways to give you direction for what to do. And he would rather replace that with these false gods. Verse 24. "Therefore, he sent the hand that wrote the inscription." Here's the handwriting on the wall, verse 25. "This is the inscription that was written, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin." Mene means, this verse 26, he goes and he explains it. He says, here is what those words mean. Mene, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Mene means measured. God had been counting. While he was partying and lifted up in pride, God had been counting and numbered his days. He had a chance to repent. He had a chance to humble himself. He did not. Now the handwriting is on the wall, if I can use that expression. He goes on. Here's the thing. Here's a hard truth. Every leader, every parent, every person in this room, the clock is ticking. We have a limited amount of time. The question is, what will we do with it? Psalm 90, verse 12 says this: teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. And have we numbered our days and we realize we're not going to live forever? I know when I was younger, it seemed like 30 was a long way off when I was younger. 30's I can hardly remember it. Anyways. The question is, are we spending our time wisely or are we wasting it? Belshazzar had one night left and he didn't even know it. None of us are guaranteed tomorrow. Verse 27, he says, Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Tekel means weighed. Your life has been weighed. Picture the scales. You got the scales. Are they in balance? Are they out of balance? His scales, his life was on the light side. There wasn't enough weight to it. It was light. It was lacking, not enough. Why? Not because of his works, but because of verse 22 again. He said, you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled yourself, although you knew this. He wasn't condemned for what he didn't know. Here's the thing. He was condemned for what he knew and he ignored. He wasn't condemned for what he didn't know. He was condemned for what he knew and what he ignored. I think the natural question for us becomes, what is it that we know to do and yet we're ignoring? Here's the things, as Americans, we're great at this because we know a lot, but we don't necessarily do a lot. We have incongruent values. We say, this is what I value, but what we do does not typically line up with our values. Incongruent values. It causes stress. It causes problems in our life. Do we really value this? Then we should do it. When you talk to a lot of people, I value God. Do you read the Bible? Do you pray? Do you go to church? Do you hang out with other believers? No, I don't do anything, but God's number one on my list. Incongruent values. It's easy to do in our culture, in our society. I value family. You value family? That's great. So you spend time talking with your kids. You spend time playing with kids. You spend time with your wife. You spend time in conversation, doing things together as a family. Well, no, we don't do that. We're all too busy for that. But I value family, most important. You see the incongruent values, we do it all the time. It's easy in our culture to do. Well, I value my health. I want to have good health. I want to live a long time. I value my health. Then you eat right. You exercise. You get enough sleep at night. You drink enough water. You eat the right foods. Well, no, I don't do any of that, but I really value my health. Are you guys with me? We are great in America at incongruent values, saying we value one thing, but then our actions are the opposite. And when they're like that, that causes conflict and problems inside of us, not just outside, but inside. And we've got to get those into alignment. It takes work, and this is where he was. His life was found wanting, and it was on the light side. He knew better, but he did not do it. He ignored it. Now, for us, the weighing of the scales isn't what we do. It's what Jesus did for us. We're not trying to work our way so the scales are balanced. The scales are unbalanced. We can't be good enough for God because we're not being measured according to your neighbor or to somebody who's doing worse than you, because that's how we like to measure ourselves, right? I mean, that's how I measure myself. I want to find somebody who's doing worse than me, like I feel pretty good about myself, right? We all do it. Yeah, you don't want to measure somebody who's doing better than you, then you feel like, man, I'm not doing so good. We're not measuring ourselves by others. We're measuring ourselves by God's standard. We always fall short. That's why Jesus came, died, and was resurrected, so that when we place our faith and trust in him, we're not measured on the scales of our life. We're measured on the scale of his life, and he doesn't come up lacking. He's got weight, he's got sustenance, and then we just follow him with our lives and allow him to work and move and change us from the inside out. Let's go to the third one. Verse 28, he says, Peres, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Divided. That's what this word means, divided. Peres means divided. His kingdom, he was going to lose his kingdom that very night. And that's exactly what happened in verse 30. And verse 31 says, that very night, Belshazzar, king of the Babylonians was slain, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. He lost the kingdom that very night. His kingdom was divided. His kingdom would pass. Here's the thing that we all need to remember is that every leader is temporary. Every position passes. Every parent eventually hands off to the next generation. The question becomes, what are we handing off? What are you handing off? Our kids, what we're passing on to our kids, they're not going to leave home without it. They'll leave home with values. The question, are they the values you want them to leave home with? Life is simply a relay of values. It's a passing of the baton, and the baton is values. Our children will leave our house with values. The question is, whose values? What values? Will they be God's values, or will they be the values of this world? Trust me, they're going to leave your house with values. Whose values will they? What are we going to leave the next generation? That's why I think the baby dedication, child dedication, is so important as parents saying, hey, I'm going to instill godly values into my children. And it's not the easy way to go. It is more difficult, but it pays huge dividends in the long run. It is worth it. Here's the conclusion. What's interesting about this story is when I think about this story, there's actually, go to my next slide. Go to my next slide. If I knew my own slides, that'd be great. There's two mothers and I think two sons in this story. The first mother we saw, the queen walks in and gives her son advice. And he doesn't take it. His life ends that night. There's another mother in the story and another son. It's Daniel's mother. And Daniel's the son. I think about Daniel's mother. And I imagine she was a lady who kept pointing Daniel to God, kept pointing her family to God, kept praying for her son, kept praying for her family. That taught him how to pray 3 times a day. That's what we see him doing in the book of Daniel. That taught him not to defile himself in Babylon, raised him in the ways of God, taught him that following God is better than any kingdom on this earth, that kept pointing her children, pointing Daniel to God. There's 2 mothers, 2 sons, 2 very different endings in this story. One is slain that night. The other one ends up with the gold chain and the purple robe and the 3rd place in the empire, although he didn't even want those things. 2 mothers, 2 sons, 2 very different readings. One kept pointing and pointing and praying, pointing her children to God. The thing about Daniel was raised in a way that he outlasted 4 kings and 3 empires in Babylon. That was the power, I think, of this mother's parenting, that he outlasted 4 kings and 3 empires in Babylon. You never know how God is going to use your child. You never know how God is going to use your son or daughter. So I would say this to every mom in here, every dad in here. I say, keep pointing your family to Jesus. Keep pointing your family to God. Keep praying over them. Keep praying with them. Keep following Jesus. You never know what God is going to do in your family. And we should just be great signposts that keep pointing. I may not have all the answers. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know which way. We're just going to keep looking to Jesus. We're going to keep following Jesus. No matter what happens, we're still going with Jesus. I think something happens in our families when we do that. We don't have all the answers. We don't know what to do, but God does. We're just going to keep looking to him. We're going to keep following him. Here's the other thing we need to get out of this story. If you go to my next slide, 3 things here to number our days. How are we spending our time? Are we wasting it? Are we investing it? What are we doing with our time? To weigh our life, to evaluate, have I placed my faith and trust in Jesus? Am I following him like I really should be? Weight of my life. And then steward what passes. Here's the thing, everything around us is going to pass away. Are we stewarding it well? Are we stewarding our families well? Are we stewarding our money well? Are we stewarding our things well? We are owners of nothing. We are stewards of everything. One of the questions I think when we get to heaven will be, how well did we steward what God gave us?